Thank you so much for looking at this tool, and this is just a quick start guide to give you an overview of how to use this tool effectively. So the main thing to know about this tool is that everything on the snapped object goes directly to the keyframes themselves. No extra constraints or parenting is created on the snapped items. The end result is just keyframe animation for tracking the other object. It does use extra helpers for more complex snapping, but your original items, objects or bones, with their current setups and pivots remain untouched apart from muting some pre-existing child of constraints to 0 when needed on certain character setups like Vertex Pro. These can just be restored again, but only in very rare situations is this actually even needed. It can be mixed with other parenting and constraints as long as you manage it correctly in terms of how the constraints themselves work. You can, for example, have a snapped item in the beginning, but for the rest of the motion, you just want to use child of constraint. You can still do that as long as you set it up correctly. Your standard parenting is still respected. So, for example, if you have a magazine parented to a gun and you reload it, Animation Snapper Pro will still respect that parenting and leave it in place and just set up relative keys for the magazine following the reload hand. It is non-destructive to object setups. So at any time, you can just edit the keyframes again, delete them, or get rid of any unused or redundant helpers that this add-on uses. If you do anything with this add-on, because the end result is just keyframes, it doesn't depend on this add-on to function afterwards. It is just standard keyframes. I recently added this ease of life function, and it just rolls a very common workflow into just a few clicks. And it's very powerful and it's very flexible. So let me show you how it works. Just a few clicks, you can actually follow any element, so as a vertex, edge, or face on any object and snap to it. So this just makes it a lot easier. As a reminder, I just put the different steps here just to have in place for this snap to work, but it becomes second nature the moment you use it. Also in this add-on now, I have either click that or this, and you can have a more compact version of this UI, and it just has fewer reminders and smaller buttons on this. But this is the full UI. This function here, snap to element bake, it does it with the offset as well. So I'll just quickly show you how to use this because this is just so useful in so many different situations. So what do you need to do first? You need to pose your snapped relative to your element. So in this case, I have a carpet here. And if I play this animation, you can see this magic carpet over here has a noise modifier on it. It has a wave modifier on it. So it animates. There we go. So I want her feet to follow the surface of this carpet. Okay, let's quickly do that. So first thing I want to do, I want to position a foot. So I'm just going to go and I am going to line this up to exactly how I want it. Okay, that's good enough for now. I'm going to go out of pose mode. I'm going to select a snapped target. So in this case, you don't need source and snapped, you just need a snapped. So I'm just going to click over the bone. It's going to fill in that for me. Then I'm going to go into my carpet. I'm going to go into, let's just switch these two on so we can see the end result. Then I'm just going to go into here and see what here would be a good thing to snap it to. So let's say that vertex over there. Select the vertex. I'm going to make sure I've set it to the time range. So use the playback range in this case. And then I'm just going to snap it forward. So first it's going to create my helper. And then it's going to snap my foot over that time range exactly to that target or to that vertex we selected. And it's going to keep this relative offset. And it's just going to follow it. So this can be used for many things. And you can also switch what it follows quite easily. And you can just keyframe in between. So let's go here. I want this ball to follow this carpet. So I'm just going to line it up to where I want it to follow. So say I want it to follow there on that little area over there. Okay, so do that in the first frame you want to snap. Then go to your object. Oh, and there's a close by face there. So I'm going to use that as my reference. I'm going to make sure that my ball or my icosphere is in my snap slot. I'm going to snap it from frame 1 to 80. And I'm just going to snap it forward. And there we go. Now it follows the carpet from 0 to 80. And 80 it stops. And now I want it to go and sit on her leg. So on frame 100, I'm just going to animate it over there. Set the key for that. I'm going to go, just put like a little in between there. So it's just going to go blink, jump onto a leg. Then from this point, I want it to follow the leg. So my icosphere is still in there. Also here, I'm going to put it compact because I don't need the explanation anymore. So I'm going to go in here, I'm going to edit mode, and let's choose a close by vertex this time. And it can be an edge as well. Let's select that vertex over there. And I'm going to snap it from 100 to 200 this time. And I'm just going to snap it forward. So first going to create my helpers, and then it's going to snap. So now we got the ball following the carpet. It jumps over onto her leg, and now it follows her leg. So you can see the flexibility of this. The most basic way to use this tool is to select the source and a snap target and snap now. It will snap the snap to the exact world position of the source or its pivot. This selection can be almost any item in your scene, but also crucially bones or rigged controllers. With the way Blender works, I try to make the selection process as streamlined as possible without having to switch modes that often just to select things. You can eyedrop pick from the 3D viewport, drag a selection from the outliner, or simply add the current selection with the arrow icon. If in object mode, you don't have to switch to pose mode to select a bone or controller in the armature. Just use the special armature icon pick bones, just activate it and click exactly on the bone or controller and the selection will be filled. Instead of the filled in fields, you can also use the use selection order mode. The first selected will be the source and the last selected the snapped. This works best if the objects are selectable in the same mode to get the selection order right. Once the source and snapped fields are filled, you can quickly swap the selection if needed with the swap button. If you already have two objects selected in the scene, you can quickly fill them into source and snapped by pressing fill from selected. As always with this add-on, first selected will be the source and the last selected the snapped item. Once the source and snapped fields are filled, you can snap to the current frame with snap now, perfect for just a once off a line. You also have the option to snap to location and rotation, location only, or rotation only. Rotation only will probably be the least used, but it could still be useful in certain circumstances if you just want to transfer rotation only. Note though, location plus rotation is forced for bones in armatures, since just having location or rotation caused problems in some cases in complex rigs. But you can always manually delete any snapped keys or channels you don't need after snapping anyway. Also another note, just to be aware of, particularly on Auto Rig Pro rigs, the limb controllers tend to have an existing child of constraint. The snapper will set these constraint influences to 0 on a snap bone controller once you start snapping. This is so it can snap accurately to world space even if the root of the armature has been moved. It does not get rid of them, so on the rare occasion you really need to bring them back to 1. You can do that by animating the influence back to 1 over 1 frame and setting the set inverse. However, personally, I would leave it to 0 and just use the snapper to vastly simplify things. Rigify Rigs doesn't have this particular minor complication since the limb controllers don't have child of constraints in the same way. You have an option to respect lock channels if you want to restrict its snapping to those channels, but it might stop it from aligning perfectly in world space, but still useful in some circumstances. With all the snapping actions, you can choose not to set a keyframe by clicking Keyframe on Snap Off. This is good if you just want to align two objects without having a keyframe on it, and a single frame normally. If you have an animation to snap, you can snap it over time. Forwards or backwards. Backwards is useful if you want to end up in a specific location at the end. You can work backwards. You can also just snap one frame at a time with step forwards and backwards. You can manually enter the snap range or just set it to the playback range. If you set off a long snapping operation that was wrong, you don't have to wait for it to finish. Stopping the snapping midway can be a bit unstable, but if you press the cancel batch button, it will stop the operation safely and undo any keys placed at the same time for that particular snapping operation. For more advanced snapping, you have the reference helper operations. If you don't want to snap to the actual pivot of an object, but have the snapped have an offset relative to the source, you can create an offset helper. The offset helper will line up exactly with the snapped, but parent to the source to maintain that offset. It can then be used as the new source for snapping. This process has been streamlined so it autofills the source and snapped after creation, so you can directly snap afterwards without having to manually fill the selection for this. This helper could also be separately animated for even more flexibility. Helper for each just creates a new snapped helper on the current location of any selected item. This can then be used as a snapped reference, perfect for creating temporary pivots for snapped objects, or marking out the position of objects. If you want a helper to be baked to a whole animation range, baked helpers will do that. It basically does what helpers for each does, but it also bakes it over time. Bake helper for element will bake a new helper setup to a selected vertex, edge, or face, perfect for tracking and snapping to a specific vertex on a mesh, even if it has modifiers or skinning. Helper for element will do basically the same, just not baked, just on the current frame. You can also pick what type of helpers it creates, just the shape and the look of them, and also the size of them, just to make it visually a bit easier to manage. And that is the basics. Check my channel and playlist for exact examples of how I use each of these tools in this Blender add-on. I hope you find this tool useful and enjoy it, and I hope you will find even more uses for it. Happy creating!